everyone. Welcome back to the Film Fund podcast. I'm your host, founder, and executive producer at the Film Fund, Thomas Verdi. I'm also an award-winning filmmaker, producer, and film festival judge. I started the Film Fund to give filmmakers an easier, alternative way to get their films funded. Instead of working on a screenplay, crowdfunding campaign, or grant application, you write one sentence pitching your film for a chance to receive up to $10,000 and other prizes to make it. Our spring 2022 narrative and documentary funding contests are now closed, so thank you everyone for entering. We just announced the final winners, but check us out at thefilmfund.co because if you're listening at a later date, these contests happen regularly, so you can check the website for the most up-to-date information where you can submit your one-sentence pitch for a chance to receive up to $10,000 to make your short film. Today we have Suzanna Klaucke. I didn't ask her if I was pronouncing that correctly before we started recording. Is that right, Suzanna?
It's Klaucke, but close.
Klaucke.
Yeah,
I am wrong. Oh for
that's
1.
okay.
Okay. Susanna Klaucke, one of our previous winners. Susanna received $5,000 to go toward the making of her narrative short film. So excited to have her on the show today. Thanks so much for coming, Susanna. Could you give us a little intro about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me. Yeah. So I am currently I work full time. I'm in advertising. I've done that for about 15 years, and I have also executive produced a couple documentaries. But this is the first time that I am really trying to push myself and write and direct my own stuff. Um, so I've kind of been on the outskirts working in creative and production um, for different clients for advertising. I've worked in nonprofit. Currently I own a small advertising agency with two other partners, so still in the creative space, and I've always made intentional choices to do that, to keep learning and keep working, because I always wanted to really make films.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of been like a bigger end goal for me. So yeah, this is really exciting.
Cool. And where are you based? I just said,
I'm
where are
currently
you
in
based?
Connecticut. Oh, sorry. I'm
Okay,
currently in
cool.
Connecticut, so like an hour outside of New York.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So, in advertising, what's your kind of day to day like? Are you on set? Are you more, creative development in the office? Like, what do you do?
Oh, that's a good question. So it's been a range. I mean, across the course of my career, I really started in nonprofit, and at that time, I basically self-taught myself. Um, it was sort of like when content on social media and all of that was really becoming a thing.
Hmm.
And I took classes in filmmaking and or editing and cinematography. So I did learn kind of how to be hands on all the different things from editing and filming and development. But then it really moved into a lot of creative development, and then being on set but not so hands on the production side. So like working with
Hmm.
production. And currently, because everything's been so remote, we've had a couple shoots on set, but it's also been a lot of just um, kind of creative development and scripting and working remotely. So
Hmm. Cool. And those classes you took, was that at a film school?
I did like NYU's continuing education courses. So it was nothing
Okay.
prestigious. But it was like a 6 week editing course. And then I did a similar thing for cinematography, but that was like way back in the
Hmm.
day.
Oh, that's so cool. So it's a 6 week program.
Yeah, it's like anyone can take it, and they really, teach you. Like I walked in having zero experience on how to edit,
Hmm.
and that really became my foundation, and it was great. I walked away, you know, learning how to do it. I worked on Avid and um, Final Cut at the time.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah, we talk a lot about film school on the show just because we have so many different winners. Some of them went to film school, they went to NYU or they went to USC, or we've had winners who went to AFI, like some really prestigious film schools, and then we have winners who have never picked up a camera before and have never gone to film school. So
Yeah,
it's always interesting to discuss like the pros and cons, and that seems like a super accessible program, and it has NYU behind it, which is good, obviously. So you
yeah,
had a good
exactly.
experience there.
I did. I had a great one. I mean, it's been many years since I did it, but they
Hmm.
had professors who taught the regular classes, and
Okay.
for me, I wasn't able to like afford or go to film school, even though I like wanted to, but it was extremely accessible. Um, and I think they have different like evening classes, or there's different ways that you can take it based on your schedule. But it was great, yeah, because I
Oh,
that
shoot.
was sort of my foundation of learning, and I have done no other film school
Hey, sorry,
since
I
then.
think the connection cut out. Can you hear me? Hello?
Oh, I'm here.
Hey, sorry, yeah, I think my Wi-Fi connection cut out for a second. Sorry about that.
Okay.
The last thing you said was, we're still recording. The last thing you said was you wanted to go to film school, but it was expensive, so you were kind of looking into other options.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It was just really accessible, and that is the only film school that I've done. I think everything else has really been like learned on the job,
Hmm.
and I think throughout my career, I just really made a lot of choices to keep learning, even though it wasn't a traditional school.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean that definitely is a viable path to take. I mean, I haven't gone to film school either. I keep like going back and forth with it. Like one episode, I'll say, "Oh yeah, I decided not to," and then the next one's like, "Oh, I'm still thinking about it." So it's just so
yeah,
expensive and it's such a commitment, and I would have to completely change my life to do it. It's such a huge, it's like at minimum 2 years, depending on what school you go to,
exactly. And
and it's
then
like
and then it's
hundreds of
often
thousands of dollars. Crazy.
exactly you walk away with with debt, and I think as a filmmaker, trying to be agile and having to be really, you know, aware of your finances and how you budget things and how to put things together. If you have that mountain of debt behind you, it's a lot harder
Hmm.
too. So.
Yeah, 100%. So in terms of what are the highlights about your work? I know you said you worked pretty much in advertising your whole life, but in terms of this film or maybe other creative projects you work on, are there any themes that you generally focus on?
That's a good question. I think the biggest thing that I've worked on sort of personally is like I said, I EP'd a couple documentaries. So one of them I wasn't on set for. I really just kind of helped provide guidance and oversight. The other one, I had a creative partner, and he and I basically developed it together. It's called Humanitarian, so we filmed Jordanian humanitarian workers who work on the border of Syria, and we did that. We filmed that back in 2018, short documentary, and that was something I'm really proud of because it was just something I worked on from beginning to start. That was kind of an inception, and creative that I developed, and just partnering on that and really creating something that was mine and wasn't for a client or
Hmm.
for work was really great. And we, submitted and went through film festivals and kind of did the full gamut, and we self-funded it.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
that was a great experience. I didn't direct it; my friend did, but I sort of was there working with all of the um, talent or our subjects, and was very hands on too. So
Hmm. Very cool. Was that a short or a feature length documentary?
it was a short, but it was
Okay.
like 30 minutes. It was a long
Oh,
short.
cool. And then
Yeah.
how was your festival experience? Did you travel for it? Like which festivals were you, going to?
So we actually were very busy with work, so we actually didn't go to any of the festivals, which
Okay.
is kind of sad. That would have been really fun.
Yeah.
We just didn't have the bandwidth to do that. But
Hmm.
yeah, we got into a number of them. I have to pull up to look at it. I think one of the most exciting ones was some of the people we featured in the film. It was through NRC, which is the Norwegian Refugee Council, and then we
Okay.
won Best Short Doc at the Oslo Film Festival. So that was
Oh,
a lot of
wow. That's a pretty big one. I've heard of that one. That's awesome.
yeah. I wish we could have gone to Oslo.
Yeah. Is that Norway?
Yep.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah.
Is that documentary available to watch like online or on any platforms?
The the trailer is available to watch. It's humanitarian.film. It's kind of like an overview because we eventually would love to make it more into a series. But
Okay.
I can find a link for you for the full one and send it
Cool.
to you.
Yeah. Send it over. We'll include it in the show notes when we post it.
Awesome.
That's so cool. Yeah. I love how you have such a like varied background going from advertising to film, and not only this pitch was for a narrative that you won the funding for, but you also have documentary. I mean, all that just helps, I think, hone your creative muscle as a storyteller, like telling different types of stories. Because like advertising is very much storytelling as well. It's a little
Yep.
more constricted in terms of what you have to do for a client. I've worked in advertising a little bit as well, especially as we launched FF Branded, our advertising arm. Um, but that's so cool. I I like. I'm very interested in your background. It's very broad and definitely helps you as a storyteller, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's true. Like you asked me what themes, just in my background, and I do think storytelling is it does sound kind of cliche, but it's true. Like no matter whether it's documentary, whether it's a commercial, whether it's a social campaign or a short film, making sure that there is a strong story is like the most important thing because you could have great production or you could have so or like budget shoestring production. If your
Mhm.
story is good, then it's going to be a meaningful piece of content. So,
What do you think makes a good story?
um, I definitely think so. A little background, but I've been doing so much screenwriting right now. I've been taking classes in screenwriting, and I also
Oh,
listen to
nice.
this great podcast, which is an amazing resource called Screenwriting Life, and it's
Okay,
done. I don't. You probably know it.
I
Megaphone,
don't
where
actually.
yeah, and it's basically I feel like a master's in screenwriting. Like they're so generous with all the information that they share, but they talk so much about something I've been thinking a lot, even in finalizing the script for this pitch, is the character agency and
Hmm.
um, how much a character, like really giving that character choices, and it's not things that happen to the character. The story is really about the choices that this character makes.
Hmm.
And you definitely have to have conflict, you have to have stakes. There has to be, in advertising too, you always think about what's the hook, what's the log
Right.
line, what's the hook, what's the thing that's gonna give that twist or that pique your interest or really hold you to the end of watching the spot.
Hmm.
So it's a
Yeah,
whole
that's
bunch of
all spot on in my opinion too. I love the agency aspect of it too because we focus on when people ask us, what do the judges look for in pitches? What makes a good story? We always say conflict and stakes. Like
stuff.
what's the conflict driving this narrative forward, and what's at stake? What is there to lose?
Yep.
Um, what are the risks? But I think agency is something that maybe gets overlooked a lot of the time because I think you see a lot of media out there where it's just like things happening to the character, like you said, and it's not, for a really compelling character, you need to they need to have to make choices. They have to have agency over their life and the story
Yep.
otherwise. And I think that contributes to the sense of the conflict and the stakes too, because you're not, the more power a character has to make a decision, I guess the more like unsure you're going to be as a viewer. Like a lot of, I think good storytelling is also, um, kind of like challenging the expected or subverting the audience's expectations. Um, what's going to happen next. And when a character has the power to make a choice, you don't really know what choice they're going to make. So I think you're touching on a lot of good stuff. What was the name of that podcast you mentioned? The screenwriting one?
It's called the Screenwriting Life.
The
Um,
Screenwriting Life.
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so I highly recommend that. And right now I'm doing it's like a 4 week just evening course with roadmap writers. So they have lots of like online courses you can take for writing. And like I said, I never went to film school, so I'm really trying to like self teach, through a
Hmm.
lot of these resources. But there's so much out there. I feel like if you're, you know, trying to work on a script, and there's a lot of great resources and classes and stuff remotely.
Yeah, it's definitely become so much more accessible
It
um,
has.
than it used to
Yeah.
be for sure. So tell us
Yep.
about your winning pitch. You don't have to give it exactly, but tell us, the story.
So yeah, so my goodness, I always have to like pull up the long line, but it's basically it's about a sculptor, and I'm still finalizing the script. So when I submitted, I had a general outline, but
Hmm.
I was pretty early on in the creative inception of it. So right now I have like a whole bunch of drafts and I'm still finalizing a few details, but
Okay.
he, there's stakes of um there's pressure on the line for him, and he has this big kind of exhibit or sculpture that he needs to finish. So there's a time crunch, and there's pressure on him, and he feels like there's a lot riding on this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in this pressured time frame, he's working furiously to finish it, and it starts morphing and changing on him. And essentially, what it ends up revealing is something that he's trying to hide about himself. I feel like there's a couple themes, and I'm really trying to crystallize in it. I think there's one theme of this battle that we have with our art, and how we want to control and create. We have a very strict image of what we think we want to create, but that's just not how art and creative works. And there is, I think,
Yep.
as an artist, a constant battle with that. Um, and yeah, so it's going to be fairly short. Right now, my script is about 8 pages.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I think I really want it to kind of verge on horror, but not quite. So it's sort
Mm-hmm.
of psychological thriller. I feel like I really love that space of psychological thriller. Maybe not full on horror, but like on
Mm-hmm.
the edges.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I didn't go to film school, like I said, but I took some I did a film studies minor at Lehigh, and so I took like 3 or 4 like, horror classes,
Oh,
actually with one of the judges of the Film Fund, Dawn Keatley. She was my professor. And so just real quick, the thriller I learned is actually, at least in terms of like academia or whatever,
mhm.
thriller is a subgenre of horror.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so there you go. But I love what you said. I love that theme of, or the concept of creating art and how it's, you have such a specific idea in mind of what you want your vision to be, what your art wants to be, and then, or not even what your art wants to be. Maybe that was a Freudian slip, but the art that ends
Hmm.
up coming to life is different than maybe what you had in mind, and it's never a perfect representation of the vision you have because there's so many other factors that go into it. I mean, that happened with me with my most recent short film. I had such a specific vision in mind. I wrote
Mm,
this one um, character for a certain actor, and then something happened, and he wasn't able to do it, and I had to cast somebody else, and it was a completely different type of performance that I had in mind. And I was kind of mad. I was like, oh man, this isn't what I had in mind at all. And I was talking to someone on the crew, actually. I think it was like the first AC. Um, he was just like, Tom, nobody knows the vision you had in your head but you.
yeah,
Like, no one, you're
true.
getting, like, it might not be exactly what you wanted, but it's still good. And it's like, it's just different than what you had in mind. And I think that's
Mhm.
part of something I learned. It's part of the artistic process. It's, you're striving toward the vision, but that's why it's called a vision. It's not, the blueprint is really just a guide for where you're going to end up.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like the work and the art we create, I mean, especially in film because it's so collaborative, so many people touch it, so you can never keep it super pristine,
Hmm.
um, to what your vision is, but sometimes that's better. And sometimes I feel like the art or the things we create, almost have become and have a life of their own, and there's something that's kind of meant to be made. Um, but yeah, sometimes it does turn out even better than what you think. Sometimes it's not what you expected. But I also think, and I try to remind myself of this because, when I put the pressure on myself of like now trying to make my own things, which I find slightly terrifying. I'm not making it for someone else, but
Right.
just making it is like winning anyway because it's so
Hmm.
hard. It's so easy to consume, but it's really hard to create.
Oh yeah.
So I feel like just actually doing it and making it is like winning.
Absolutely. It's just that sense of fulfillment. It's like, hey, I actually created something.
Yeah,
Um, Whether, it goes anywhere or not in terms of festivals or distribution or who
yep,
sees it. Just the that's why you have rap parties because people are so excited. Like, hey, we created something, we did it. Um,
exactly.
I mean, then there's the editing, but yeah, it's so exciting to create something, and I definitely feel that high whenever I finish a project. It's like, wow, I did it. And, I always have the anxiety like, oh, great. Now I have to submit it to festivals. Is it going to get in anywhere? There's always that question. But yeah, I
Of
think
course.
just the act of creating something is really fulfilling. I think that's super important to focus on too.
Yep.
So in terms of the sculpture morphing into something that he's trying to hide, is that going to be, are we going to have special effects involved, or is it going to kind of be off camera? What are you thinking there?
Yeah, so I've been wrestling with this. I would love I'm trying to do some research and talk to friends who are artists and who are sculptors
Hmm.
and to figure out what might be the best way to do it. So it is like the bust of somebody.
Okay.
Um, and I I am not sure how I'm gonna pull it off. So like I have
Yeah.
thought about can you almost make it someone and like use material where you can just shoot it in a way where you can change it in between shots.
Hmm.
Or I also thought about what if you never really see it, but I think that would
So
make a
you would
difference.
be, it would it be morphing all like off screen between shots, or would you be having it like, would the audience be seeing it morph?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. I don't
Okay.
know.
Gotcha. Well, good luck with that process.
Thank you. I don't know what's
Also, the
possible.
budget constraints are tough too, because like if you had a
Exactly.
$1 million budget, it's like, oh, we'll just hire, VFX artists and they'll figure it out.
I think
But
it will probably end up being a way to cheat some of it where
hmm.
there are reveals of like the stages of how it changes,
Hmm.
but probably maybe not see the motion of the change on camera.
Yeah.
Because I think it's more too about, it's less about the shock of the thing changing and it's more about the tension of him realizing that it's changing or like working furiously and then it like changes on him when he turns around and looks at it. So like building that
Hmm.
tension and it's really about like his reaction and kind of that terror. I mean, it's kind of I think a creepy concept to think of something
Yeah. No, I'm super interested in this, and
changing on
um,
you. So
I have the pitch here. Now we leave it up to the winners. Sometimes we read the pitches and post them on the website. Sometimes we wait until the film is released because a lot
okay,
of filmmakers are protective of their pitches and ideas. Um, would you want me to read it, or do you want to wait until it's released?
you can read it because I kind of said it. I don't know if I'd want it
Okay.
posted, but I'm fine with you reading it.
Okay. Cool. Let's see here. An artist loses control. Oh, my screen just went crazy on me. Where did it go? Da, 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 da. There we go. An artist loses control when the bust he is sculpting begins to mold on its own, bearing a terrifying resemblance to something he's trying to hide. Need money for location, talent, set design, and DP. And that's a great pitch for a number of reasons. But the thing I like the most about it is it leaves you wanting more. It's such a creative, creepy concept. Like this bust is molding on its own. That's creepy in itself. And then it's
Hmm.
bearing a resemblance, but not just any resemblance, a terrifying resemblance. And it's something he's trying to hide. And
Yeah,
you don't tell us what he's trying to hide. And so
yeah,
that's just like, you know, it leaves you wanting more. It's,
yeah.
you're clearly, you talked about, a hook, and you're working in advertising and making things compelling. That's a very compelling, concise, interesting premise, and it just, there's a ton of conflict there. It's like the man versus the sculpture, the external conflict, the man versus himself with something he's trying to hide. He's clearly struggling with something inside. It's just I'm really excited for this project. I'm excited for all the projects that win, but this one's really, really cool, and I
Oh,
can't
thank
wait
you.
to see it. So you said you're currently still working on finalizing the script.
Yes, yep. Still finalizing, and I have a whole bunch of drafts.
Hmm.
Like I said, I really want to make sure it's right, and I have people who I'm gonna send for notes and everything. Because I really want to, I do really want to make sure that the stakes are high, that it all holds together, and that like the payoff lands. So I feel like there are a whole bunch of just like beats that I want to ensure are working well before
Hmm.
before I totally dive into production. And then I do have to start thinking about some of the practicality of like also how do I write it in a way that I can film it on a budget.
Right. I always
So
struggle with that. I write these like big epic
yeah.
fantasy things, and then like one of the previous shorts I did was called Son of Blackbeard, and it was this magical realism thing about these pirates, and I'm like, wait, I don't have budget for this. Is a period piece. I ended up doing it, but like a
Oh,
way lower budget than I wanted to. Um, it's
yeah.
just crazy. We put a lot of favors on that one, but yeah, that's definitely an indie filmmaking like tip to keep in mind. Like write practically. Like
Yes.
I
Yep.
need to. I think the next thing I write, and I always say this, it needs to be like, oh, let's make it take place in like one room, like
Right.
that kind of things. Like I can actually make this with one location, one shooting day,
Yeah.
instead of four with six different locations. And yeah, definitely always keep in mind what you have to work with, and you can even write around things you have. Like if you
Yeah.
had a really cool prop or something, you could write a story around that. That's always a good way to go about it as well.
Yeah, that was honestly one of the things that I thought when I submitted this idea was I was like, this is one that I could shoot in an art studio.
Hmm.
Essentially, the whole thing can happen there. I might do a
Hmm.
scene or two outside of it, but like it's pretty contained. Um, and the drama happens within that space. So I was like, okay,
Right.
at least I know that.
Hmm.
It's one way to help contain it. So
Yeah, for sure. And what is your, I was going to ask your writing process like, but also like your ideation process? Like, where do your ideas generally come from?
um,
It's kind of two different questions.
yeah. So for the ideation, I mean, really, it just comes randomly at just different moments. I could literally be just taking a walk, or I watch something and it inspires something, or something an interaction happens with someone. So, I mean, for me, I just have like so many Word documents on my like account that is just full of like notes and ideas and like
Hmm.
little paragraphs of like building things out. I have a whole bunch of outlines for different things. So I don't really just have like one thing. I mean, I kind of focus on one thing at a time, but I definitely have like a
Hmm.
bunch of things going. In terms of writing, I mean, it's sort of newer for me to make a conscious effort to be like, all right, I'm really focusing on my writing, and I'm doing this short film, but I also recognize like if it goes to festivals or if you meet connections and someone likes your film, you have to have other work also
Hmm.
to share. They're like, okay, cool. So what else do you have going? So in my
Exactly.
mind, I have a couple longer features too that they're not very built out, but I am working on. And I think the biggest thing is just self discipline.
Hmm.
So, you know, making it a priority to carve out time
Yeah.
and not being discouraged by like if I just do an hour here, a couple hours here, every little bit of progress, like it compounds, and
Hmm.
it really just has to become like a discipline, which I'm not that great at, but I'm really working
Yeah.
on.
No, I struggle with that too. I am the same way. Like I have the other night I had a really vivid dream and I woke up at 4 in the morning and just started writing it out on a legal pad. So now I have like all these pages of basically an outline of a script. It's like, when am I going to write this? I'm also working on a book that I started over the pandemic and just abandoned. I have these shorts. It's just like, I always say, okay, well, I'm going to dedicate time to writing on the weekend, and then it just never happens.
Yeah,
Um, but when I do carve out that hour, it's like, oh, that actually was really good, and I felt like I made progress. So it is really about being disciplined with it and um,
yeah.
doing it. But that's such a a hard thing to do when you're working full time and have other responsibilities too.
It is definitely, I mean, between work, between friends, family, all of our kind of things that we just have to do for regular life.
Hmm.
I do find like taking some of these writing classes gives me some accountability because I definitely do better if I'm like, oh no, someone is like gonna wait to read it, or I
Right.
have to show up to this class and have made progress. So I
Hmm.
find that's I guess externally motivated by some of those things. I think that's helpful, and if you can, I'm not part of a writers group, but I think some of those things I would imagine would be helpful too.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's like little by little, and I feel like if you put in an hour to a few times a week, after a couple of months, like that's a lot of hours of writing.
Yeah.
So I just try to remind myself that you know may not feel like big progress every time I sit down, but it will be if I stick with it.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely some advice I'm going to take. Maybe I'll join a writers group or a class or something to be more accountable. I'm definitely not good with unless I'm like in the middle of writing something, then I'm really into it. But like, I don't know, getting started with it is always a chore. Um, so we're gonna plug the Film Fund a little bit. What are some of your favorite things about the Film Fund?
Well, I am like really grateful for the Film Fund. Honestly, this is like one of the only competitions that I felt was accessible to me where I'm at right now. So many of them I feel like you have to have something so polished or have everything figured out, have a full on script. It just felt really intimidating. And with the Film Fund,
Hmm.
I was like, okay, I can also time wise, I was like, I can do this. Like, I
Right.
can submit some sentences. Obviously, I did a lot of research. I like
Hmm.
read through the winning pitches. I read through everything the judges look for. I like dissected all of the sentences you have on
Oh,
there.
cool.
I really looked at like what I think doing your homework for whatever you submit for is really important.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, just the accessibility of it, and it really gave me like great motivation to be like, okay, I can actually get this made. So I
Hmm.
think it's an awesome resource for people of any breadth of filmmaking, that especially for those of us who are really trying to like start out or do it, finally do it.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the kind words and the feedback. It's definitely accessibility and ease of submission is really what I wanted to focus on when I was creating it, because they're just so. I mean, I always say screenwriting contests are great, grants are amazing. They're hats off to those organizations who are able to give out that funding to those filmmakers, but they are a lot of work, like to submit grants, grant applications, and
Oh yeah,
screenwriting contests. We were just talking about how hard it is to write, to have a whole screenplay,
right.
especially if you're just writing it on spec. Like that's a commitment. It's really a full-time commitment to do. So I wanted something a lot simpler. So I'm glad that you've had that. I'm also super like not grateful, but it's so awesome that you found the resources we have in terms of like what the judges look for in our sentences, because we do have a few key blog posts that say like how to get funding from the film fund, or
Mhm.
we have this whole case study. I might pin them to the website actually, so that they're a little easier to find. But there's a whole case study from winner Don Finelli, who did Sunday Dinner.
Yep.
We take his pitch and we just go through it. I did it. You just go through
Yeah,
his
I read
pitch,
that one.
like
Yep.
beat by beat. Like these are the words he uses that are really compelling. This is how he gets conflict across in such a short amount of space. So yeah, I guess I am grateful that you found those resources, and that they were useful to you. So that's
Yeah,
awesome. Do
absolutely.
you know how you found the film fund? I'm always interested in like, are marketing efforts working, or
I did. I think I saw it on Instagram, honestly,
oh,
or
okay.
website. I don't know. I don't totally remember, but I know I saw it a
Hmm.
few times. So like I had seen it maybe a year or two before I submitted this time, and I was like, oh,
Okay.
that's so cool. Like I do when I'm ready, I want to submit to that. And then
Hmm.
when I had these things going, it popped up again, and I was like, that's right. Oh, that's perfect. So then I, prepped and submitted this last, I guess, two submissions ago. But
Awesome. And it ended up working out.
I did. I know. I It's so funny when I saw the finalist, I was like, oh, that's awesome. But I didn't really realize, well, I guess I got the email from you. I think I didn't totally realize, like, oh, wow, I won and it's for the narrative.
Hmm.
It was really cool. So,
That's awesome. Yeah, I love sending out those emails and getting the responses. Like, it's just so exciting because you're creating something. It's just from almost like
absolutely.
nothing. It's like I created this as a college project like 5-6 years ago now, and didn't really know anything about marketing or filmmaking or any of that. And so now, like, I send these emails. I was like, oh, I'm giving $6,000 away to somebody to make something, and they respond and they give me updates on their film. It's just so gratifying. It's so cool. I love it.
Awesome.
So, what is next for you, Susanna? I know you're finishing up the script.
Yeah. So I'm finishing up the script. I will probably send it out for notes. And then I'm really grateful because having worked in advertising and having a lot of connections in creative and production, I do have people that I will reach out to and then really start to build out a production plan and put that together, to get it made. I mean, ideally I would love to shoot it this year. I think I have to self-fund some of it too, so it just is
Hmm.
dependent on how all of that comes together, but that's my ideal goal. um
Cool.
yeah, and then I think also just like I said, continuing to write and work on thinking about the bigger picture, like down the road, if I really want to do more, I really want to write and direct. So
Hmm.
thinking a few steps ahead always, and continuing to write and have other things going. So
Yeah, it's always tough doing multiple things, but we managed to get it done somehow. And I found that writing is always a good way to kind of stay sane. So
definitely.
that's awesome. Well, keep us posted on all your progress. Send me emails whenever you have an update. We'd love to share them with the community. And I just want to, thank you so much for taking this time to speak today on the show. You said you found us on social media. I know you have social media accounts. Could you share them with us so our listeners can check you out and follow you?
Sure. I'm not like super active, but I'd say my
Okay.
Instagram is probably the best place. It's just Suz, and my last name Klaucke. So
Okay.
Klaucke.
Cool. We will tag you when we release this episode, which should be, I don't know. I've been doing them like once a month, so it might not be for a couple of months, but we'll see when
Okay.
it comes out. And so stay tuned. Our latest contests, I said they are closed. We just announced the winners, but if you're listening at a later date, we will be opening our next contest in late June 2022. So check that out. Subscribe to our email newsletter for the updates on that. I want to thank everyone for listening to the podcast. Check out thefilmfund.co to submit your entry to our next contest. Check out our social media channels. We're on Instagram at the Film Fund, Facebook, Film Fund Co., Twitter, simply Film Fund, and LinkedIn, just the Film Fund. Super straightforward. I don't know why we're on LinkedIn. Most filmmakers hate LinkedIn, but whatever. So check out the website for the most up-to-date info. Remember to check out our blog, blog.thefilmfund.co. That's news, what's going on with the film fund, what's going on in the industry, and check out our learn page on the filmfund.co/learn, what used to be our blog for great filmmaking and producing tips. We have a lot of writing tips there too if you're struggling with how to come up with ideas or how to structure your budget or your script. Definitely check that out for sure. We also have an ebook on our resources page, which has all that information in there as well. How to plan a shoot, how to schedule a shoot, how to do location scouting, how to cast, everything you need to know to get your production off the ground. Everything Suzanna kind of has a background for being in advertising, already learning, how to do that stuff, which is part of the reason I think her background is so interesting. Anyway, thank everyone for listening or watching. If you're checking out the video version, we're on YouTube and Instagram and all those fun platforms. Tune in every month for new episodes. We usually release them on Fridays. Susanna, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, just thank you so much. It was great chatting.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Great chatting with you. Talk to everyone soon.